My name is Dylan. I am 63 years old. Exactly 1 week ago, when a thick, stinging fog hung over the Thames, my divorce was officially finalized. 40 years. Think about that number. My ex-wife Sarah and I were married for 4 decades. That's not just a period of time. It's an entire geological era. Most people my age are already looking for a cozy cottage in the Cotswolds, planning how they will babysit their grandchildren and arguing about what kind of roses to plant on the porch. But here I am, in an empty, fresh-painted apartment in Hampstead, and I need you to hear what I'm about to say, because my story could save you years of your life that you risk wasting on the right existence. My story is not about scandals, broken dishes, or dividing up property. It's about how a perfect life can slowly and politely suffocate your soul. The date on the documents was clear: January 1st, 2026. Sarah, with her characteristic practicality, asked for that specific date. It had to do with our joint investment accounts at Citi and our joint tax return. I had worked for 40 years as a senior lawyer at one of London's leading firms, and I was used to the cold glint of legal terms and compromises in courtrooms. We were so civilized in the process of separating that it was chilling. Neither of us raised our voices. We discussed the division of our Chelsea property with the same calmness with which we chose the type of tea for breakfast. We were completely, devastatingly estranged. On paper, we had it all: a prestigious address, an impeccable reputation, our son Marcus, who was our pride and joy. Sarah wasn't a monster. She wasn't unfaithful or cruel. She was the perfect partner in a social contract. But she was no longer the woman I wanted to hold after a hard day. When it came time to tell Marcus about our decision, I saw in his eyes the same icy confusion I had seen in the eyes of our longtime friends. Marcus is a grown man now, a successful architect who designs houses for people, but he was completely unprepared for his own foundation to turn out to be an illusion. He was looking for a reason, some kind of high-profile betrayal, financial disaster, secret second family, anything that could justify this collapse in his mind. But there was none of that, and it was precisely the absence of dirty laundry that made my actions seem like an act of senseless madness in the eyes of those around me. Why break something that is technically sound? Marcus grew up in a house that seemed to all of us, including him, to be an unshakable fortress. He saw parents who were always polite to each other, who never argued in public, and who always found a rational solution to any problem. But I remember the moment when that facade began to crack inside me. It happened a few years ago when Marcus finally moved out, started his own family, and our huge house in Chelsea suddenly became empty. The silence in the rooms became deafening. One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, dreading the moment when Sarah would return from a charity event. I realized that for all these 40 years, it wasn't closeness that bound us together, but a project called family. We were brilliant top managers of the Dylan and Sarah Corporation. We successfully raised our product, our son. We paid off the mortgage and created a brand. But when the project was complete, I looked at the woman across from me and realized that if we weren't talking about business, schedules, or Marcus, we had nothing to say to each other. I began to suffocate in this politeness. My body began to protest. Panic attacks, which I mistook for heart attacks, sent me running to the doctors on Harley Street. They threw up their hands until one old psychiatrist said to me, "Dylan, your heart is fine. It's your life trying to break out of the cage you've been so diligently polishing for 40 years." When I first realized that my marriage was just a well-rehearsed performance, I didn't rush to file for divorce. Oh no, I'm a lawyer. I'm used to saving hopeless cases. I decided that we had to fix it. I suggested to Sarah that we see a family therapist, one of the best in London. Sarah agreed with the same polite smile she used to agree to buying new furniture or choosing a hotel for our vacation. We went to sessions for a whole year. We did exercises, we learned active listening. We honestly tried to find the threads that once bound us together in our youth. But here was the problem. We had both learned the rules of the game too well. We said the right words, we expressed our feelings according to the manual. But the room was still cold. I worked endlessly on myself, trying to become a more open, more involved partner. I thought that if I changed my behavior, the spark would return. But one day during a session, the therapist asked us about intimacy. Not about how often we had sex, but about when was the last time we just held hands for no reason or looked into each other's eyes for more than 3 seconds. There was silence, so thick you could cut it with a knife. I looked at Sarah and realized that there wasn't even basic physical attraction left between us. We were like 2 brothers or old roommates. There was warm familial love, but not a gram of life or a drop of passion in it. We were emotionally exhausted from endless attempts to connect. My body began to scream again. I started having hearing problems, a painful ringing in my ears that doctors couldn't explain. It was the noise of my own lies, which I could no longer ignore. I was beating a dead horse, and it had already begun to decay, poisoning everything around it. Divorce after 40 years is not just a legal process. It is the dismantling of an architectural monument. Everyone around us thought our decision was crazy. "Dylan, look at your life," my friends at the club would say to me. "Sarah supports you. She's a wonderful hostess. She's good to you. You have everything you need. Why ruin everything in your 70s?" And I asked myself the same question over and over again until my therapist said something that became my lifeline. She asked, "Dylan, imagine that your son Marcus is now 60 years old. Would you want him to live the way you live? In polite numbness, without touch, without real happiness, just to keep up appearances?" The answer was instant and painful. No, I wanted real, living love for Marcus. The kind where people laugh until they cry, where they touch each other in passing in the kitchen, where they feel desired, not just provided for. And then I realized that if I stayed, I would be setting Marcus and his children the worst example in life. An example of how you can voluntarily give up your heart for the sake of stability. Leaving was the hardest decision of my life. Sarah took it with a dignity that almost destroyed me. No shouting, just a quiet question. "Are you sure?" I said yes, and in that moment, I felt like I could finally breathe. I was walking into nothing, into the unknown, but it was a living unknown. I chose myself not out of selfishness, but out of a deep respect for the life I had left. I wanted to be truly loved, not just tolerated or valued as a good provider of resources. And it was worth destroying the house in Chelsea. The first 3 months in my new apartment in Hampstead were the strangest and, frankly, the most frightening of my life. After 40 years of living in a huge house where every creak of the floorboards was predictable and every breakfast followed a strict schedule, I suddenly found myself in a space that knew nothing about me. I would wake up at 4 in the morning, stare at unfamiliar shadows on the ceiling, and for a split second forget where I was. My hand would reach out of habit to the other side of the bed to adjust Sarah's blanket, but would only find a cold sheet. In those moments, a wave of doubt would wash over me so intense that I could barely breathe. "What have you done, Dylan?" whispered the voice in my head. "You're an old fool. You had everything. Respect, comfort, a devoted wife. And now you sit in silence. And the only thing you hear is the sound of rain outside the window and the hum of the refrigerator." Loneliness at 63 is not the same as loneliness at 20. When you're young, it feels like freedom and opportunity for adventure. At my age, it's like being in outer space without a spacesuit. I sat in coffee shops on Hampstead Heath watching people for hours and felt like a ghost. I saw elderly couples walking hand in hand and wondered, are they really happy? Or are they just better at pretending than I am? I started doing little things I had forgotten decades ago. I started going for walks with no destination, without looking at my watch. I reopened the art books that had been gathering dust in the basement of my house in Chelsea. I discovered that I liked buying the foods I loved, not the ones that were good for our shared diet. But the hardest thing was to admit that the emptiness I had been running from in my marriage hadn't gone anywhere. It was inside me, and now I had to learn to fill it myself, without using Sarah as a living shield from reality. My relationship with Marcus after I left was like walking through a minefield. At first, he only called me on business, his voice dry, formal, and tinged with hidden resentment. To him, I was the man who had destroyed his perfect childhood, betrayed his mother, and made a mockery of their family values. But a month ago, something important happened. Marcus came to my place to help me assemble a bookcase. We worked in silence, concentrating on tightening the bolts, until he suddenly put down his tools and asked me point-blank, "Dad, couldn't you have just endured it? For our sake? For the sake of your grandchildren? Mom is having a very hard time right now. She doesn't understand why you're treating her this way." I looked at my son, a grown, successful man, and for the first time in 40 years, I decided not to be the wise lawyer father, but just to be a human being. I told him about the loneliness you feel when you sleep next to someone in the same bed. I told him about panic attacks and how for years I had suppressed my desire to simply be loved, not just functional. I told him what broke my heart when I realized it. "Marcus, I didn't leave your mother. I left myself. If I had stayed, I would have turned into a shadow. You would have seen a living corpse in front of you. Is that really the memory you want to have of your father?" We talked until 3 in the morning. It was the most honest conversation of our lives. For the first time, Marcus saw me not as a function that provided stability, but as a man with his own wounds and dreams. By the end of the night, he hadn't said he forgave me, but he shook my hand and stayed for breakfast. At that moment, I realized that divorce had not destroyed my family. It had humanized it. I was no longer an idol on a pedestal. I was a living father. I began to return to what I once loved. I bought a set of chisels and some wood. My grandfather was a carpenter, and I remembered how much I enjoyed feeling the resistance of the material as a child. Now, in the evenings, my apartment smells of wood shavings and cedar. My hands are calloused, but my hearing has started to return, and my panic attacks have disappeared. I'm still afraid of the future, but this fear is alive. It means that I've finally woken up. 7 months have passed since the day I closed the door of our house in Chelsea behind me. 6 months of living in Hampstead have taught me that silence can be a friend, not an enemy. Last week, Sarah and I agreed to meet at a small coffee shop on neutral ground to finalize some details about taxes. I walked into that meeting with a knot in my stomach, expecting to see a broken woman whose eyes were full of reproach. But when I walked in, I froze. Sarah was sitting by the window, wearing a bright blue scarf I had never seen her wear before, reading a book. She looked calm. Her face was free of the perfect lawyer's wife mask she had worn for decades. We talked for 2 hours. And for the first time in many years, it wasn't about Marcus's schedule or heating bills. She told me she had enrolled in art history classes, something she had dreamed of doing since college but had always been too busy with the house. We looked at each other and both smiled sadly, but sincerely. We realized that our divorce was a liberation not only for me, but for her as well. She, too, had been a hostage to this perfect facade, but was simply afraid to admit it first. We parted as friends, truly without pretense. I walked home through evening London and felt incredibly light. It turned out that you can love someone as part of your history, but not let that history stifle your future. We both finally began to breathe freely, and that was the greatest blessing of our divorce. People often ask me, "Dylan, don't you regret it?" Wasn't stability and 40 years of shared history worth just living out the rest of your life in comfort? My answer is always the same: no, not for a second, because I know what would have awaited me in that house. I would have slowly faded away, turning into a bitter, disappointed old man who hates his own reflection in the mirror. I would have continued to play the role of the happy grandfather at family gatherings, feeling completely dead inside. Divorce doesn't have to be a disaster. Sometimes it's the only right decision simply because you want to know what it's like to be truly loved. Not just valued as a reliable mechanism, not just tolerated for the sake of propriety, but loved for who you are. I am now 63, and I am just beginning to discover who Dylan is without his city title and without the role of head of the perfect family. I work in my small workshop. My fingers smell of sawdust and wax, and I feel more masculine and alive than I did in all my 40 years at the law firm. I want my son Marcus to see before him not a monument to duty, but a living person who found the strength to choose the truth. Life is too short to spend it maintaining a beautiful facade. If you feel that your marriage is empty, if you fall asleep next to someone and feel like you are in an icy desert, don't wait for tragedy to strike. Your unhappiness is reason enough to change something. You deserve intimacy, you deserve touches that matter. It's never too late to wake up and start your story over. Dylan's story is a reminder that honesty with yourself is worth any hardship. If these words resonate with you or help you realize something important in your own relationship, please subscribe to our channel. Here we share stories that help you take off your masks and find your way to yourself, regardless of age. Like this video so that it will be recommended to those who may now be sitting in the silence of their perfect home and are afraid to take the first step. Your like is support for those who are looking for courage. And be sure to write in the comments. Do you think it's worth saving a marriage for the sake of the children and stability if there has been no intimacy for a long time? Have you had the experience of starting life from scratch in adulthood? I read every one of your comments, and your thoughts are what give our channel meaning. Share this video with someone who is currently searching for answers. Sometimes one honest story can be the push that saves someone's life from years of stagnation. Take care of your soul. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Live authentically right now. Thank you for being with us.